And I think, generally speaking, across the board, though it does seem that most women, they're looking for a guy who's going to be somewhat more dominant, both in terms
Totally
in
agree.
general life, but also in the bedroom as well. And I suppose a big problem with that, and we've talked about this before, is the chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Whereby if you're a guy and you haven't got a lot of sexual experience, or you haven't got any sexual experience, then how do you bring that energy before in your first sexual encounter? Then do you fake it till you make it, or do you? In fact, actually, I did a video about this the other day, because it was from a Reddit post, and the question was, there was something on Reddit, and he was basically saying, look, I haven't had sex before, or maybe he'd had sex once, or he was a virgin. And he said, I'm getting really close to this girl. Do I tell her that I'm not experienced, or do I just not tell her? So what would your answer to that be? What would you advise him to do?
Really good question, because I had a client actually who was in this situation. And what I would advise is actually to talk about it.
Really? Okay.
So let me me get back. Say it if you feel uncomfortable. I always think that it's the best to cut it out if you feel uncomfortable. If you always ejaculate too quickly, cut it out. Why? Because if you don't talk about it before, then you're most likely going to disappoint your partner. And it's kind of the same. If it's your first time and you feel that you're not equipped to give a pleasure, it's always best to talk about it. Think about it in reverse. If you're with a woman and she's a virgin, you would prefer that she tells you she's a virgin, because like that, you know that you're going to take your time and you're maybe going to act differently. Now, the worst thing for a woman is to have this cocky, like showing off. And then in the bedroom is like a virgin or almost a virgin, like that's the worst. Women, from all the women I've talked to and the men who were with women as well, they always had a great experience when they were able to say, hey, listen, I don't have a lot of experience, but I want to give you a lot of pleasure. It's always talking about, think about, you want to give pleasure. If you have sex, it's because you want to share pleasure. So if you talk about that, again, we're talking about someone who is inexperienced, saying like, hey, look, I don't have a lot of experience, but I really want to give you a lot of pleasure. Like my client, for example, it was his first time. The woman at the end, she said, there's no way it's your first time, because you were so smooth, you were taking your time, you gave me so much pleasure. There's no way it was your first time. But it was, because he was able to express himself and to take his time. I will never say that enough. Take your fucking time. Slow the fuck down, especially at the beginning, because you take enough time to know the person, know what she wants, know what she doesn't want, and then to play with. If you don't have a lot of experience, it's not going to be like, you're not going to rock a world like a porn star. Just be aware of that. But she can have a great experience with you.
So no, that's really interesting, because I have to say, I think my advice, I think I came down on the other side. I basically kind of said, just kind of wing it and fake it till you make it. And the reason I said that, I think there's arguments for both. The reason I said that, and maybe this is me being overthinking it, but the reason I said that was because I think that women, generally speaking, we kind of understand that women tend to like a man who's got experience. They tend to find that idea attractive because of pre-selection, but also because he knows what he's doing, and she wants to feel like she's going to have a good time. I mean, obviously, I do, though, take your point. If she's led to think that she's going to have a great time and then it's not great, then that's going to be a net negative for her. But it's a really interesting one. But maybe the thing that I didn't take into account is that I think sometimes we can think that women are going to be sort of, and sometimes they are, but maybe not always, that they're going to be so hyper judgmental that if you do one thing wrong, she's just going to kick you to the curb. And that's not necessarily true, is it?
Troy, be honest with me and all the people watching. How many times have you been with very judgmental women that were judging you on your sexual performances?
Not very many, to be honest. I can't really think of it, to be honest.
And when you were with this type of woman, I've been, and it was maybe like 2 or 3, I realized that they were not the woman I wanted to be with. So, okay, the experience was shit. Maybe she was judging me. But then I was like, okay, if she's judging me for that, I definitely don't want to see her again, and she's not the right one for me.
Yeah.
So for me, it hacked as a real good filter. Now I totally agree with you. Most women, they want a masculine man, they want a man who take initiative, who is good in the bedroom. But when you don't have experiences, and maybe it's your first or your second time, I do believe that by telling the woman and asking her what she likes, you will develop much more experience in this first or second experience rather than hiding and trying to do things that you've seen in porn, or that your friend told you, like, oh, do the alphabet when you lick her pussy. No, like, ask the woman. She will tell you what she enjoy, and if you do it great, she will tell you that you're an amazing lover.
Well, yeah, I think that's true, because obviously, you know, she's there. Yes, of course, she wants to have a great sexual experience, because who doesn't? But equally, she's there because she likes you, she's attracted to you, and she wants to be intimate with you. So, you know, I think that you're right. I mean, most women are just gonna accept it on its own terms, you know. And it's like, I think sometimes this is one of the dangers of, you know, when you get so wrapped up into the whole red pill content and that way of looking at things, we tend to start to see things as being this very, like, oh, you know, if you don't give her multiple orgasms on day one, she's gonna block you, and, you know, if you don't have 5 Lamborghinis, she's not gonna look at you and everything. And it's all very kind of exaggerated versions of reality, isn't it?
Look, you said it. Like, how many women do you know that were saying, "Oh, if you don't have 5 Lamborghinis, I'm not gonna have sex with you"?
Well,
and again,
I've only got 4.
You only have 4.
So I'd be out the game, unfortunately.
But look, like, to come back to the chicken or the egg. Now, I think you will agree with me. It's very, very important. It's crucial that, especially for men who don't have a lot of experience, to learn how to be more experienced in the bedroom. Get a coach, read books, watch courses on how to give pleasure to women, because it exists. And I'm pretty sure that most of the men watching now, they didn't have a masculine figure. They didn't have a father or an uncle telling them, hey, you should do this, you should do that, you should take your time. Like, you can learn how to give and share with women multiple orgasm. But in this society, in this modern society, nobody told you that when you were a kid. So that's why also it's very important that you take your sexual education in charge. And that's why also, like, there is so many coaches like me helping men. It's because we realize that today men are left alone, especially young men. They are left alone, and there's no masculine figure. I was talking to a client this morning, and he told me, like, my father was a beta male. I can't tell you how many men I've talked with, and they told me, well, my father was a wimp, he was a simp, he was a beta male.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you know, and certainly, I mean, I would hesitate to call my dad that, but I think there were elements of that, and also certainly never talked about sex. I mean, so where do you learn about sex from? And I come from, you know, because I'm incredibly old now. You know, I come from a generation before, you know, you know, so we didn't even have James Dean videos to learn sex skills from. Like,
you're lucky.
Well, incidentally, what's your official party line on porn? Because is it a force for? Well, obviously, generally it's a force for bad, because guys, you know, develop a problem and stuff. But from a purely, is there something to learn from it, or would you say that's a very bad way of learning sex skills?
So it's a really good question. I would say if I had to put a number, I would say it's 95% bad. But if you are strong enough, if you are disciplined enough to say, I will only watch porn to educate myself, I will keep my hands out of my pocket, that can be a good tool. Because, for example, if you want to learn the art of cunnilingus, oral sex, where are you going to learn that? A lot of people can tell you, oh, you can do this and you can do that. But if you don't have the visual, it's going to be very tricky for you to learn about it. So that's why also there is some sex educational courses that are made for that. So I believe that porn can be a tool, but of course, especially nowadays, especially how free and easy it is to consume. And I'm from the generation, look, I've been addicted of porn for so many years, and it was so difficult to get rid of it, because when you start to see that at 13, your brain is like, oh my God, that's the shit. I want that every day. And it's like every day you consume more and more and more. So it's very difficult to get away from that. But again, if you're very disciplined and you want to learn special practices and special tools, it can be good if you keep your hands out of your.
Well, because you know Tiffany Fox, who the former actress, adult actress that I used to I worked with last year, and we did that course together. I mean, she was kind of obviously she'd worked in the industry. She wasn't sort of wholly pro corn. We should maybe say corn, actually, because YouTube doesn't like the word very much. But she wasn't like wholly like saying, "Oh, this is a brilliant thing." She was actually trying to discourage women to get into it and saying it could be very damaging. And of course, it could be. She acknowledged it can also be damaging for men when they get a dependency on it. But she did also kind of say, "Look, there are some things that you can learn. There are some things you can pick up." And I think that's kind of true. But I would agree with you. I mean, ultimately, it's better to go to somebody like you. You know, it's better to go to a coach or a therapist who could teach you, properly what you're meant to be doing. Because obviously, there's this like problematic side to corn as well. Charlotte, the Night Star Werewolf, says, "You old never, lol lol lol." She likes the older guy. She likes the little wink, the little wrinkles, the little crow's feet. Definitely.
That's sexy.
Exactly. Definitely.
All this
daddy. She likes the daddy thing. Definitely. So we've got a few questions here, so we can go through. Well. The first one's quite a big one, actually, because he wants to talk about sexual shame. What exactly is sexual shame? Can you give some examples?
So, for me, sexual shame is when you can't express yourself verbally and non-verbally, and when you don't accept your own sexuality and you are not proud of your sexuality.
Right.
That can be due to traumas, that can be due to a lack of sexual education. But a perfect example of sexual shame is you're not able to talk about sex. You're not able to talk about sex with your friends. You're not able to talk about sex with women. You're not able to talk about sex with an intimate partner. That can be a sign of sexual shame. Sexual shame can also be, for women specifically, it can be not wanting to make love with the lights on. And some more and more men struggle with that because of body dysmorphia, like they are scared. Oh, is my genitals big enough? Like, do I have bigger arms? Like, because I saw in Discord movie that I had to have an 8-pack and to be like 7 feet, So this can create a lot of bad comparison when you only think like, oh, women, they only want this Chad 7 feet, So sexual shame is, again, not being able to be comfortable with your own sexuality and not being able to express your sexuality with others.
That's a really interesting definition of it, because I have to admit, when I first heard this term being used, I'd heard you using it and James using it. It kind of made me think about like Catholic guilt, it kind of made me think almost like religious guilt. Oh, I'm sorry, I find shame. But the way that you're explaining it, it's a lot broader than that. It's more, and actually, for me, I guess I did suffer from it because one of the biggest revelations for me in this whole game and dating thing was that not only is it okay to be sexual when you're interacting with a woman you're interested in, but it actually improves your chances of something happening with that woman. Because, and I think the reason for that was partly cultural, like the British sort of, a little bit of I know we've changed now, but a little bit of the old British, you don't talk about that stuff and
the
everything
Victorian
like that.
era.
Yeah, and when I was born, and my my upbringing as well, and also just this sense that, oh, if I say anything that's, I think there's also fear of risk as well, actually, because if I say anything that's vaguely flirtatious or sexual in front of this girl, then she's going to know that I'm interested in her in that way, and then she might reject me, and that's going to be painful, and I don't want to risk that. But of course, what you learn is you have to lean into that risk, because the truth of the matter is you do find her attractive, you do want to be intimate with her, and okay, yes, she might reject you, but like, you need to at least put it out there, because she's unlikely to do it for you, and you end up in the friend zone. So, like I said, one of the biggest things I learned, one of the biggest things I suppose I had to overcome, was the shame of being a sexual person in the presence of a woman that I was attracted to, even though that might mean I risk getting rejected by her. And once I got over that, and then what I realized was, actually, when you're sexy, you're flirty, little bits of touch, the eye contact, dropping in little sexual innuendos, that massively spikes up your chances of something happening with her. And I think part of the reason for that is what you referred to before, because when she's with a guy that she can feel confident with, because he's open sexually, then she feels she could be open sexually. That's when stuff starts to happen, And that was a massive revelation for me.
Men need to realize that women, they won't talk about sex if you don't do it in the first place. Now, like, you hear a lot of women, most women. I always go back to one, like, being more specific. Most feminine women, yes, they want polarity. Most feminine women, they want a masculine man that will take the lead, that will do the approach, that will lead for the first date, and also who will lead to talk about sex. Now, as you said, in a calibrated way, in a respectful way. But I see so many men who tell me, oh, I'm too scared to talk about sex because of Me Too. I'm too scared to talk about sex because if I go overboard, then I'm going to be seen as a creep or as a weirdo, or I'm going to get canceled on Twitter. Guess what? 9 feminine women out of 10, they want you to talk about sex. Why? Because they crave it. They crave to meet men who are confident talking about sex and who are still respectful. The dark gentleman, the sexy gentleman, that's what most feminine women want. So if you're not able to talk about sex, as you said, you put yourself into the friend zone.
Yeah.
And a lot of men, they are like, oh, but I'm waiting for the signs. Like, you're thinking reverse.
Yeah.
You have to push it a little bit. As you said, you have to go a bit beyond your age, as David Deida said, and you have to be ready to take a little bit of risk, because when you take this risk, you realize, oh, she's into that. She's ready to dance. She's ready to talk about sex.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I remember reading early on in the days of learning about dating skills and game was, you want to be she will put you into a category depending on the way that you act. So if you act as the kind of sexual guy, the sexually confident guy, she's going to be like, okay, right, he's one of those guys. And she puts you into that box. If you are the super shy, super serious, the conversation never goes near anything like that, she's going to then put you into that box. And if you're in that box, then just by definition, it's going to be harder for her to, it's going to be less likely anything's going to sexually happen, because for a start, she's unlikely to make it happen herself, because she's going to want the guy to make the move in most cases. And secondly, I think one of the things that women hate more than almost anything is feeling awkward, and yes. It's like, oh God, this is really cringy, this is really awkward, and blah, blah, blah. And if you present as the guy for whom sex is, well, and another important thing actually is being judgmental around sex as well. I think that's an absolute no-no. Like, whatever she says, she says she's into some crazy kind of thing on the date, you're just like, oh, okay, cool, interesting, right? No judgment at all, because if you're judgmental, and this is one of the, again, you're watching all these shows and they're talking about, oh, women, they're all these, they're this, they're that, blah, blah, blah. If you take on some of that and you're communicating that, that's a very bad look, because again, she's not going to want to open up to you sexually when you're judgmental of her.